Welcome to another Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday episode. I'm your host, Aman. Today, I'm going to talk about the Chargers moving on from Brandon Staley. It seemed like it was a long time coming, and I will break down everything that went wrong for the Chargers and why it's probably a step in a positive direction. But before we start, make sure to follow us on all social media platforms. They're in the description of every single video. We post shorts daily and the episodes on Spotify and Apple every single Saturday, so you never miss any content from Evan or I. But without further ado, let's get us started with Brandon Staley being let go this morning after just an embarrassing defeat. Embarrassing defeat to the Raiders team, who had just gotten shut out the previous week by the Minnesota Vikings. And Joshua Dobbs, who was struggling, benched him for Nick Mullins. And so now Josh Dobbs is now the third string quarterback, and he's the one that started against the Raiders, the same Raiders team that had gotten, like I said, shut out, 0 points the entire game. And now, the following week, literally days later, you got the Raiders putting up the most points in franchise history. And obviously, earlier in the season, you see the 70-20 loss by the Denver Broncos. They obviously didn't let go of Sean Payton because it's his first season, and now the Broncos are rolling. They have a shot at making the playoffs after an abysmal 1-5 start. I believe they're 6-1 since. So the Broncos, as of late, have been one of the best teams in the league, record-wise, of course. And obviously, also division rivals, the Chargers. And now you got the Chargers, Raiders, Broncos, all like the Chiefs. Even though they're struggling, it's fine for them because they're not in jeopardy of missing out on a playoff spot. Obviously, it's looking like they're not going to get the 1 seed anymore, and Mahomes will have just to play his first road game of his career in the playoffs, which is kind of crazy to think about because he's been in the playoffs a lot. He's been in so many playoff games a lot. Every playoff game has been at home, and the road to the Super Bowl leads through the Kansas City Chiefs normally every season in the AFC, and now obviously that's not the case. I believe Baltimore Ravens now have the bye in the AFC. Could work against you because players might be out of form, but of course, everyone just wants that extra week of rest. And then, I mean, that's for the Chargers. You have an all world, I wouldn't say generational, but for sure franchise quarterback at the helm and Justin Herbert. And you're relying on him to make these superstar big plays. And now when he's injured, this is why, like, even if Josh Dobbs is struggling, he's still a high level backup quarterback. This is why when teams invest in backup quarterbacks for just in case moments like this, might not affect him as much. And it's not against Easton Stick, who barely even played football because he's always been a backup to Herbert. Herbert normally plays through injury. And now that he can't, Stick goes in, starts, and I mean, honestly, what did you expect? And it started when Staley took a timeout against the Raiders with 30 seconds to go in overtime when it stopped the clock for the Raiders. So as a result, the Raiders eliminated the Chargers when if you didn't call a timeout, both teams would have made the playoffs. The following year, they made the playoffs and lost a 27-0 lead to the Jaguars. And now this just happened. And a lot of people were calling for his job, like pretty much at halftime because I mean 42-0 in one half is just sad. And yes, the turnovers you can't blame him at all, but just the play calling, Eckler's just been a struggle bus this season. And it's not a good look for running backs, especially when someone who's normally a superstar running back does not perform well because obviously there's contract disputes. The position of the running back is being in question. And I mean, when you got that happening, Eckler's not performing. It's like the Chargers always have weapons, but Mike Williams gets hurt. Johnston is looking like he wasn't the correct pick. The Jigbo is looking like the better receiver. Addison is definitely looking like the best receiver in that draft class right now. And then even Rashee Rice in the second round. And it's looking like the Chargers shows are wrong. receiver, and I mean they let go of their general manager too. But I mean, as for Staley, I feel like we all saw this coming. As for him calling defensive plays, it's he's supposed to be a defensive-minded coach, but the Chargers defense has never been up to level. And when they did sign JC Jackson, he did really well for the Patriots, and I mean he got injured instantly with the Chargers and never regained his all-pro form. And so that was unfortunate for them at the time because you were forming an insane trio with Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and JC Jackson, of course. Now they don't have him back on the Patriots. And I mean, Khalil Mack's leading the league in sacks. How do you have that guy and still allow the other team to score 63 points? I mean, Aiden O'Connell's the backup quarterback. Let's not forget that, too. So you have like I believe 50 something quarterbacks starting this season, different quarterbacks starting this season. It's crazy to think about, but it's true. And Brandon Staley, I guess he tried to do the best with the cards he was dealt because his only defense is the amount of players on offense that continues to get injured. Like it almost felt like he's never had a fully healthy roster to give himself the best chance. And of course, there's so many scenarios where he didn't call plays correctly or coach correctly or called something correctly. But at the same time, it's Mike Williams has been injured a lot. Johnston's been injured. Herbert's been injured. I'm pretty sure now he broke his finger on his other hand. So you got that. Joey Bosa has been injured. Khalil Mack was injured at one point. Of course, JC Jackson missed a long time. So you've got so many injuries to the Chargers, despite how many weapons they have on that team, and you're asking Herbert to do so much, and as a result, you're wasting his talent. And I feel like it would have been a different story if maybe the Chargers didn't get injured. And even before Mike Williams got injured this season, Eckler was still struggling. The Chargers weren't doing much, and I just feel like how are you a defensive minded coach or how are you supposed to be a defensive minded coach, but your defense is still one of the worst in the league? You've invested in your O line receivers with drafting Johnson. You have an all pro running back in Austin Eckler. I don't know if he actually is an all pro, like because of Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, and whatnot, but Eckler is like the caliber, one of the best running backs in the league. And yeah, you got him struggling. You're just not calling plays correctly. And like I said, on top of that, even though Khalil Mack's one of the sack leaders in the league, how do you still have the worst defense? Like that just can't happen when you have a defensive minded coach. And so now you hire a new coordinator in Kellen Moore, supposed to unlock Justin Herbert, and now Staley's calling defensive plays. I feel like at some point you got to relieve someone of their duties. Like maybe Staley's just a head coach, someone else calls the defensive plays. Maybe that change needed to happen. And I feel like the past few seasons, you see these lapses. You see Staley take a timeout when you're in the playoffs. All you got to do is just get over the finish line. You're in the playoffs. Obviously, they would have been one of the lower seeds, but Herbert was playing well. And then you call a timeout and you miss the playoffs entirely just because of that. The Raiders were all prepared to go for a tie. Raiders, Chargers both make it. But now you helped out your division rival. Obviously, it still didn't work out for the Raiders in the end in the playoffs, but I mean, you still missed out on a chance. And all you had to do was protect a 27-0 lead against the Jaguars, against a very struggling Trevor Lawrence, because it was his first playoffs. And I mean, the Jaguars caught up, and now you have Kellen Moore. The offense was supposed to be more dynamic. Of course, like I said, Mike Williams got hurt. Johnston was hurt. Herbert was hurt. I feel like you still have to keep Kellen Moore around because just like Staley, he hasn't had a fully healthy roster to properly coach. And I mean, that's just my opinion. Keenan Allen actually has the most receptions in the league, which is crazy to think about. But then at the same time, like, your offense has just been too stagnant. Like, you're pretty much wasting years off of a franchise quarterback and Keenan Allen, who is one of the most underrated receivers in recent memory, in my opinion. because you see what he's doing this season, even though the Chargers record isn't as good. But Keenan Allen's been automatic this season. I feel like Brandon Staley had to let go. There was definitely needed a change on the staff side because I don't think the Chargers have a shortage of talent, even with the Mike Williams injury. I feel like they still very well could have done well with a different coach, maybe a different defensive look, which is why Staley had to have been let go. And perhaps the GM was let go because of that Johnston pick, because you did have Addison on the board, JSN on the board, and Rashee Rice on the board. That's my take on the whole situation. I do agree with the moves, and I feel like this was coming for a while. So now Staley is officially fired, their GM too. So we'll see. It's probably positive for the Chargers, just refreshed going into next season with hopefully a healthy team because they were supposed to make a lot of noise. And now they are definitely struggling, but you still have Herbert. He's going to be healthy next season. I feel like they have to make the playoffs next season. Otherwise, consider going for a full-on rebuild. I have no clue, but you definitely got to fix that defense more than the offense, in my opinion. So, without further ado, that ends today's episode. Make sure to tune into the shorts every day or episodes every single Saturday. Have a great week.